Welcome to Military Analytics. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization does its best when it comes to displays of deterrence against potential adversaries. Apart from the activities of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea, the movements in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Mediterranean are mobilizing the NATO navies. NATO measures were increased with the landing of the Russian hypersonic missile ship Admiral Gorshkov in the Mediterranean recently. In addition, the activity of the Russian Navy, Slava-class cruiser, Variag, and Udaloy-class destroyers in the Mediterranean was also remarkable in the past months. Last week, the Spanish patrol boat was identified as two Russian ships, the Admiral Casado Nav frigate and the Academic Passion tanker in the Mediterranean. Let's take a look at the professional measures of the NATO Navy against Russian Navy ships in the Mediterranean and examine the situation there as divine justice. We strive to bring you the most striking news, collective and accurate information from the front by working hard day and night with our expert staff as quickly as possible. You can support us by subscribing to our channel. Accordingly, it was revealed that 3 NATO aircraft carriers were conducting exercises in the Mediterranean as a message to Russia. Photographs published recently on the U.S. military's Defense Visual Information Distribution Service show Bush in formation with the Italian Navy aircraft carrier Escalate and the Spanish Navy amphibious assault carrier and aircraft carrier ESPs, Juan Carlos, one among other warships. These carriers were participating in NATO vigilance activity. Neptune Strike 2023-1 or NEST, the first such iteration of the naval exercise this year, which saw more than 31 ships and 135 aircraft, including the new F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Following the announcement of this engagement, 3 NATO carriers from the United States, Italy, and Spain completed their multi-carrier operations in the Mediterranean as part of the planned deployment of the USS George H.W. Bush Aircraft Carrier Strike Group to the U.S. Navy Europe Operations Area. According to NATO, this exercise operated in close coordination with support troops from Greece, Turkey, Croatia, Hungary, the Netherlands, and Albania. According to the alliance, during the exercise, approximately 8,386 sailors and Marines from 21 NATO countries conducted a wide range of naval, air, and ground activities providing deterrence and reassurance. Although Russia's invasion of Ukraine was not explicitly mentioned in the statements of senior Navy leaders, the purpose of the exercise organized by NATO countries was actually to intimidate Russia. In addition, it was clear that this thought was the first thing in the minds of the commanders in the NATO alliance since it was watching the eastern border of the alliance. In this regard, the commander of NATO's attack and support forces, the U.S. 6th Fleet, U.S. Navy Deputy Vice Admiral Thomas Ishii, made a statement praising the sailors, Marines, and airmen in the NATO forces. According to Ishii, these forces proved that with their confidence, agility, ingenuity, and perseverance, they deter aggression and the alliance is ready to defend. Just months after the unprecedented integration of both the Bush and the next generation USS Gerald Darford aircraft carrier with the French Navy's Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier Caver and the UK's HMS Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier. It also marks the first time Bush has operated directly alongside Allied carrier strike groups since the end of November, when 5 Allied strike groups were in European waters. On the other hand, with this exercise, Bush, who was first deployed after about 5 years after a period of intensive maintenance, showed his readiness for duty and relieved the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier as part of the U.S. Navy's 6th Fleet in September last year. Also, the level of trust developed between U.S. and Allied forces through this exercise during our time on the battlefield, including past iterations of NEST and other bilateral and multilateral operations, will benefit in the future because national security and Euro-Atlantic security depend on the strength of teamwork and the common purpose of Allied countries. The warships of the Russian Navy will now begin to swim in much more dangerous waters due to the power created in the face of this stunning NATO exercise. In this regard, Italian Naval Forces Commander Enrico Corradino stated that the aggressive attitude of the Russian fleet in the Mediterranean caused such exercises. Additionally, Corradino stressed that Russian Navy ships cross the Mediterranean in numbers not seen even in the Cold War, increasing the risk of an incident with NATO forces in the normally stable region. Corradino stated that this increase coincided with an aggressive attitude similar to the Russian naval forces' posture in the Baltic Sea. It was clear that the approach of the Russian frigate Admiral Gorshkov, armed with hypersonic missiles to the Mediterranean after exercises in Africa, could worsen the already complex and turbulent situation. In fact, NATO allies have repeatedly affirmed the right of all nations to cross international waters peacefully. But if the Russians' attitude still does not change in the face of NATO's strong navy, we may face very serious consequences of this situation in the coming days. On the other hand, as the tension in the seas increased day by day, the U.S. Navy's 6th Fleet in Europe and Africa did not answer the Stars and Stripes questions regarding the presence of the Russian Navy in the Mediterranean. US officials have previously said that interactions with the Russian Navy occur with a certain frequency and are generally safe. But in November 2022, a Russian ship's encounter with the George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier strike group in the Mediterranean was found amateurish by a U.S. admiral who did not go into details. That same month, 2 Russian warplanes approached NATO ships in the Baltic Sea at an altitude of about 90 ft and at a distance of 80 yards, ignoring interrogation communications, according to a NATO statement. Open-source intelligence analysts recently posted on Twitter and other social media sites that Russia's naval fleet in the Mediterranean appears to be increasingly active. Previous reports indicated that the bulk of the fleet had been in the Syrian port of Tartus on a regular basis over the past year. NATO's mass deployment of naval forces in response to the threat of the Russian fleet was most likely made possible by the presence of the U.S. Navy Carrier Action Group centered on the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush. Also, the George H.W. Bush strike group remained in the eastern Mediterranean after being deployed there due to the February 6 earthquake in Turkey. This group included the destroyers USS Netzer, USS Delbert D. Black, USS Farragut, and USS Drexten. In addition to the cruisers, USS Light, Gulf, and carrier Air Wing 7. The presence of U.S. military power in the Mediterranean began to seriously worry Russia because the Russian Ministry of Defense has confirmed that 6 amphibious warships leaving the Baltic Sea are on their way to the Mediterranean to participate in naval exercises. This amphibious fleet can swing north from the Mediterranean towards the Black Sea. There has already been considerable debate among experts and observers over whether these ships will be the true final destination, which will put the ships in a position to support a possible new large-scale Russian intervention in Ukraine. In addition, 3 Project 775 Ropacha-class amphibious warships of the Russian Navy's Baltic Fleet were seen leaving the area. These ships were 2 Ropacha and 1 Project 11711 type. The Ivan Gren-class landing craft from the Northern Fleet followed these 3 Russian ships the next day, while 3 Russian ships first began to move south through the English Channel. It was reported that the second trio began to move towards the North Sea after being delayed due to bad weather conditions. To date, there has been no official statement of where the Russian ships went. This new official announcement regarding plans for these amphibious warships was reported in a press release regarding a Russian naval exercise unrelated to Chinese and Iranian forces in the Gulf of Oman. These exercises included the Slava-class cruiser, Varyag, and the Udaloy-class destroyer, Admiral Trebis, and fleet oiler, Boris Batoma. All of the Russian Navy's Pacific Fleet are currently participating in these exercises, but they will later join amphibious ships in the Mediterranean, according to the press release. However, after the NATO exercise, it was claimed that the flagship cruiser Varyag moved away from the support forces in the Mediterranean. It was claimed that the power of the U.S. 6th Navy had an effect on the situation. Separately, the Russian Navy's Vishnya-class intelligence collection vessel, Vasily Tadistchev, was spotted crossing the Strait of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean. It is unclear where this ship went, but it certainly makes sense that its appearance is somehow related to these other Russian naval movements. Russia has announced that the upcoming naval exercises in the Mediterranean will be part of a wide array of naval exercises worldwide, involving a total of about 140 ships and 60 aircraft, including in the North Atlantic and Pacific regions. The purpose of the exercise is naval and air force exercises to protect Russia's national interests in the world's oceans and the counter-military threats to the Russian Federation. The Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement, "But considering the total number of NATO's naval forces, it is clear that Russia's effort is a show of strength because since the beginning of the Ukrainian war, Russia has used the same tactic not only in the seas but also in land attacks. But we will see more clearly in the coming days." What kind of dangers or clashes the tension in the seas will bring? The latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine war reveal that the war will intensify even more, contrary to the idea that it will end soon. While the Russian army is dealing with military personnel and ammunition problems, the images and reports published the other day were interpreted as the Ukrainian army started the spring offensive that it has been preparing for months, because the Ukrainian army has realized a first since the beginning of the war. The Ukrainian army crossed the Dnieper River and deployed on the banks of the river. Russia experienced a great panic in the face of this development, which happened for the first time in the war that has been going on for about a year and a half, because the Ukrainian army has started to advance on the Russian territory on the edge of the river. The army's goal was to reach Crimea, which was unjustly annexed in 2014. As a matter of fact, while all these events were taking place, explosions occurred in Crimea. And Daily News Team reports the developments on the banks of the Dnieper River and the explosions in Crimea, which are important enough to affect the course of the war. We continue our work with the information we obtained directly from the field, and with our expert team members, each of whom has adopted the understanding of accurate and impartial journalism. You can click the Super Thanks button below to support our teammates and our work. Let's examine all the developments together with the withdrawal of the Russian occupiers from the Kherson region in the last months of 2022. The Dnieper River became the front line. This was a major step towards achieving Ukrainian leader Zelensky's ultimate goal. Zelensky's goal was to retake Crimea from the Russian occupiers. The occupation started with Crimea and will end with the retaking of Crimea, Zelensky said in many of his speeches, and his brief and victory was strengthened by the success of offensive of the Ukrainian army, so much so that the Ukrainian army is advancing towards Crimea. With the latest developments, Ukrainian army's spring offensive has been on the agenda for a long time. A careful analysis of the report recently published by the Institute of the Study of War, based on images obtained by the Russian authors, raised the question of whether the Ukrainian army had launched the spring offensive because the Ukrainian army deployed on the banks of the Dnieper River and advanced from Kherson across the Dnieper River near the town of Oleshki. And as far as Dapchi, the footage allegedly obtained from Russian authors shows amphibious vehicles of the Ukrainian army landing on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River and building a bridge in this area. The Ukrainian army had destroyed bridges in this region in the last months of 2022 while trying to repel Russian invaders from Kherson. Explosions were heard in Crimea as the Ukrainian army advanced through Kherson towards Crimea. The Russian occupiers were shocked by this comprehensive attack by the Ukrainian army. Images of the explosions in Crimea was shared on social media. The explosions occurred in the city of Sevastopol on the Crimea Peninsula. Crimea, which Russia occupied in 2014, became a risky area for Russia with the war that started in 2022 because the goal of the Ukrainian army was to take Crimea from the occupiers. The Ukrainian army pushed back Russian troops in the occupied territories and advanced towards Crimea. When Russian leader Vladimir Putin began invading Ukraine, he hadn't thought about these days, however, sanctions imposed by Western and European countries, soldiers who did not want to take part in the occupation of Ukraine, and ammunition shortages made the Russian army fail. Ukraine continues to corner the Russian invaders with its ever-growing army. After the explosions in Sebastopol the other day, the occupying governor of the city, Mikhail Ryske, said in a statement, "An attempt was made to attack Sevastopol from 3:30 am today." Rorfiev said that the explosions were caused by downed drones. He explained that the drones were shot down in a protected area outside the city and that there was no damage. But the accuracy of these statements is not yet known. As it is known, Russian authorities have been hiding their losses and making false statements since the beginning of the war. This is because Russia cannot accept the setback it is experiencing against Ukraine. There were many comments on social media about the statement of Rauzahev, the occupying governor of Sebastopol. Among these comments there were many statements that really barbed statements were not true. Indeed, many social media users stated that the explosion on the Crimean Peninsula caused damage to the city. At the same time, local news outlets also shared information that refuted the Russian official statements. One news channel wrote consequences of explosions in Sebastopol. Windows were broken in some coastal houses and advertising lighting was broken. The blast also opened balcony doors and windows in a new building. Developments along the Dnieper River and on the Crimean Peninsula show that the Russian army is exhausted before the Ukrainian army deployed on the banks of the Dnieper River. The Russian occupiers are said to have retreated from this area because the occupiers have lost even the power to repel the attacks of the Ukrainian army, so much so that thousands of Russian soldiers left the front line, while tons of ammunition were destroyed as a result of the successful attacks of the Ukrainian army. The Russian army is forced to retreat from many regions due to its losses. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has taken a series of measures to solve the problems in the army, but without success. Putin's decision to mobilize was also ineffective because Russian youth now know that there is no point in fighting Ukraine. They do not want to die for Putin's political interests and personal career. Putin has not been able to solve the problem of soldiers to take part in the invasion of Ukraine, nor has he been able to solve the problem of ammunition in the army. Putin, who held talks with countries close to Russia, such as Belarus and China, could not achieve what he wanted as a result of these talks. The Ukrainian army, which is getting stronger day by day with the support of Western and European countries, inflicted heavy losses on the Russian army. The losses of the Russian army, which has a shortage of soldiers and ammunition since the beginning of the war, are as follows: 187,080 military personnel, 3,683 tanks, 7,139 armored combat vehicles, 2,849 artillery systems 539, reactive spread fire systems 289, air defense systems 308, aircraft 294, helicopters 5,753, automotive and tank equipment 18, military ships and boats 911, cruise missiles 2,413, unmanned aerial vehicles 339, special machines for operational tactile missile systems. The ever-increasing losses of the Russian army are causing many problems in Russia. Russian people are constantly protesting for the war to end because almost all of them have lost friends and relatives in this war. In addition, the sanctions imposed by Western European countries have negatively affected the Russian economy. Inflation is constantly increasing in Russia because the sanctions do not stop. One wonders what Russian leader Vladimir Putin will do in the face of all of these problems. Putin's advancing age and illnesses are also effective in failing in his decisions. For this reason, people believe that Putin will not be able to improve the situation in Russia. Even if Putin gives up the invasion of Ukraine, it seems impossible for the people to forget what they have been through. This is why Putin is becoming more and more hated by almost the whole world, especially by his own country. How do you interpret the Ukrainian army's attack on the Dnieper River and the Crimean Peninsula? Bad news for Putin. Turks came to support Ukraine. Turkish convoys have reached the Russian border. Kremlin issued a red alert with the shooting down of the Turkish ship in the Black Sea. Things got completely messed up. What will Putin do now that he has lost the only country in the West with which he can form an alliance? Turkey's aggressive move will cost Putin big time. There is only one weapon that has been important from the very beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war. This weapon not only changed the entire course of the war, but also made Ukrainian soldiers write songs about it. We are talking about Bayraktars, the favorite weapon of Ukrainian soldiers. Bayraktar is one of the most important unmanned aerial vehicles. Ukraine has been buying Bayraktars from Turkey since the beginning of this war. The most important feature of Bayraktars is that they do not only have kamikaze feature like other attack drones, it is both powerful enough to deal a major blow to the Russian army and capable of expanding Ukraine's intelligence network. Therefore, it has a very serious importance among UAVs. But Turkey's latest move will completely change the course of the war. All the world's media now knows that Russia's recent search for allies has always come up empty-handed. But Ukraine, on the contrary, is taking Ukraine as an ally. This is because Ukraine has been pursuing a just cause since the beginning of the war. But by convincing Turkey to become an ally, it has caused a huge damage to Russia. Because Russia had a plan to turn Turkey into a natural gas base. But these plans were seriously thwarted. In these days when Russia has nothing to do, Turkey started to support Ukraine through the Black Sea, while fleets of ships were mobilizing to send certain ammunition to Ukraine. When it became clear that Turkey was going to do, Putin looked for a hole to escape. While it is known that Ukraine is actively using Bayraktars, Turkey has made a very big move in response. Turkey, which wants to build the new Bayraktar factory in Ukraine, will now completely reverse Putin's invasion because with this step, Ukraine's superiority in the air will come to a completely different point. Putin cannot take these facts which the whole world is aware of any longer. Knowing that his power on the rocks, he threatens the countries that support Ukraine against every support that comes to Ukraine. Immediately after this plan, Turkey mobilized many weapons in its inventory. Especially hedgehogs are of great importance in this regard, and an army of hedgehogs large enough to make a large convoy of armored vehicles was sent to Ukraine. This is a support that could completely change the course of the war because as long as the modernization of Ukraine's army continues, there is not much Russia can do. It is possible to say that if Ukraine maintains this advantage, Russia will be hit in the heart. But the backdrop to this event is the complete end of Russia's Black Sea dominance. Turkey's reason for providing this site resonated around the world. Turkey, with this relaxed move, is actually telling Russia that the Black Sea dominance belongs to it. The Black Sea, which Russia sees itself as the sovereign in many areas, has now become a sea that prepares the ground for support to Ukraine. Ukraine may thank Russia for this site, but its real move is to expel Russia from its territory as soon as possible. But Russia's reverse move alongside these steps has angered Turkey. The main reason for Turkey's support for Ukraine is that Russia has been conducting exercises in the Black Sea recently. And in one of these drills, Russia hit a Turkish merchant ship, which increased the tension considerably. Since Russia openly wants to say that my word is important in the Black Sea, Turkey is making a smart move to prevent this, mobilizing all the means at its disposal to put Russia in the opposite corner. When Putin heard about this support, he got very angry and made a big decision. He announced that they had decided to abandon the decision of the natural gas base he wanted to build in Turkey and decided to determine a different epicenter base. This made the strange Turkish-Russian relations even more tense. As a result, Turkey is expected to provide much more support. Turkey is considered to be the decisive power in this war, especially with the effect of the recent innovations in the defense industry. According to war analysts, the fact that even Turkey, which maintained its neutrality even in the World War II, is supporting Ukraine, signals the end of Russia's dominance. This is because Turkey usually expresses its neutrality in such words. But Putin's unstable policies and erratic behavior have made Turkey very often. What will happen if things get complicated is unknown, although it is not known how long Russia will continue these moves. The shooting of the Turkish merchant ship had complicated things considerably. Now the possibility of an attack on the support sent by Turkey has mobilized NATO. Turkey is seen as one of NATO's most important countries. Its military power and technological prominence in the sector make it one of NATO's decision-making mechanisms. Despite many complications, this never changes. So a possible Russian attack against Turkey could turn into a world war in an instant. Let's look at the reasons for this together. Turkey is the center of the world in terms of its geopolitical position. Therefore, it has a very important geography. It acts as a mediator because it acts as a distant country towards all other countries. Its good foreign policy moves also make it an indispensable ally. This is seen as one of the main reasons why Russia and the US have good relations with Turkey. Ukraine's recent rapprochement with Turkey has started to disrupt the situation because Turkey is one of the Western countries. It started to make moves to stand by Ukraine. Turkish and Russian soldiers had previously clashed secretly in Syria. Knowing this, Ukraine has been trying to draw Turkey to its side from the very beginning. Ukraine's rapprochement efforts have recently begun to bear fruit because Turkey sees Russia as an enemy in the Black Sea, and this enemy must be crushed as soon as possible. If Turkey remains silent against these events, the damage will be much greater. Therefore, at the very beginning, Turkey needs to show Russia who owns the Black Sea. According to war analysts, Turkey's many weapons are expected to be decisive in this war because the technologies developed by Turkey are considered as the weapons of the future. Aware of this, Russia is trying to respond with the unmanned aerial vehicles it bought from Iran, but Bayraktars are crushing them on the battlefield. Therefore, Ukraine seems to have chosen the country. It will ally very well. If it had not done so, the Ukrainian army would have had many problems against Russia since the support provided by the US is only for self-defense. The Ukrainian army is helpless in some positions. The Ukrainian army, which has never been able to move to an offensive position, seems to solve this problem completely because many of the weapons provided by Turkey can also be used for offense. Since all countries know this, there are some who oppose Turkey's support. The main reason for this is the possibility of World War III, fearing the possibility. All countries want Russia to continue its occupation in response to this cowardice. Countries such as the US, Germany, Turkey, and Israel prefer to act bravely and take action against the unjust occupation. Especially how brave. Turkey's move was echoed in the world press for a long time. It is not known how this tension will end as Russia has nowhere to run.